Nothing's more frustrating than feeling like your body's working against you. Digestive troubles, skin issues, constant congestion, ugh. Yet, never knowing what's causing it. If any of that sounds familiar, it might be time for our gut health quiz. In just 3 minutes, you'll find out if dairy is behind your diarrhea, heartburn, constipation, bloating, acne, or even that never-ending mucus situation you got going on. Here's the good news. There is a solution. You do not have to keep living with these symptoms. Take the quiz, get answers, and start feeling like yourself again. So don't wait for your next dairy disaster to unfold. Take the gut quiz and share it with your friends. It just takes 3 minutes. It's a gut health quiz, and you can take it today at switchforgood.org/gut-health-quiz, which is really annoying to try to have to remember. So just go to the show notes to this podcast episode and click on the gut health quiz. Start feeling better today. So we're stoked on our guests. We have Nimai Delgado on. We loved this conversation with him. Bummer news is we had trouble with our video connection. So this one is audio only, folks, which was kind of a sad deal, but we wanted the audio to really come through. So we yanked the videos. But in this episode, we talk about personal fulfillment. We talk about whys. We talk about Hare Krishna, spirituality. We talk about food, protein, nutrients, like using oil as a tool, not as an ingredient. Of course, we talked about bodybuilding, and we talked about love and love lost as well. Nimai's just kind and generous and thought-provoking through this entire episode, and there's so much more to him than his bulging biceps. So we really hope you guys enjoy our conversation with Nimai. We're of Men's Health and Fitness, and the first to earn an IFBB Pro card. And by doing so, shattering the typical meathead, bro science-backed mentality that real men need meat to gain muscle. Nimai's competition career began when he applied his engineering mindset to fitness and saw meaningful results. Raised vegetarian, he decided he wouldn't just compete, but he would lead by example to prove that building muscle is possible on a completely animal-free diet. In the 5 years since his first competition, he's gained nearly 650,000 Instagram followers and educated the masses about the benefits of a vegan diet. I first got to meet Nimai on a rainy evening in 2018 at the Sundance Film Festival as we were about to premiere the documentary film We Are In, The Game Changers. Nimai is somewhat soft-spoken. He's kind, he's generous, and there is so much more to him than his bulging biceps. One of which I learned is aptly named chickpea. The other one, Nimai, I'm going to let you tell everyone. And welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dotsie, for that awesome intro. If I remember correctly, I think I named the other one grapefruit.
That's right. I couldn't remember for the freaking life of me, and it was pissing me off this morning. I know it. I just couldn't get it to come to me. So yes, chickpea and grapefruit. So Nimai, gosh, as a former athlete myself, I get asked that ridiculously exhausting question, although we understand that it's important to people. Where do we get our protein? But my answer to that question has actually changed over the years as I continue to try and kind of make it a clearer answer, an easier answer for people to be able to kind of understand and apply. So I was wondering what your answer to where do you get your protein, what your answer was, let's say 5 years ago, and what your answer is today.
That's such a great question. And like you alluded to earlier, I definitely wish that I had a dime or a nickel or even a penny for any time somebody asked me that question. I would be on a yacht right now. But yeah, initially, I've been hearing that question maybe in a different form my entire life. Given the fact that I was raised vegetarian in, the South, where animal products are a large portion of their diet, I was always asked why I didn't eat meat or, what was the reason why I was vegetarian. And I didn't really recognize it at the time whenever I was younger. But essentially, those conversations that I had early on were kind of priming me for what I'm doing now. And it took me a long time to realize I kind of saw those, as interrogations. And maybe some of them were, and some of them came from a lack of understanding, and then some of them came from a place of judgment. But really, what I learned as time went on was that people just are unaware of an alternative way of living. And that is exactly what this plant-based vegan lifestyle, whatever you want to label it as, has taught me, is that it doesn't have to, you don't have to follow the same thing that everybody else is following. There are alternative ways to live that yield the same results, or maybe even more beneficial to you, that you're just unaware of. So my answer to that question has definitely evolved. From in the past, it was a little bit more direct, as far as I just started listing the foods that I ate, which is, it's common knowledge at this point, is just, beans, legumes, protein shakes, tofu, tempeh. Those are like my main sources of like protein dense foods. And then beyond that, I mean, all plants contain protein. When you combine them, they add up, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a singular item on your plate that you label as like, this is my protein source. You start to look at your plate more collectively and say, here's a little bit of protein, here's some other protein, here's a lot of protein. And that kind of answer lasted for quite some time. And then I started answering the question with a question. And just to kind of reflect back to the person asking me, when I have the capacity to answer this question, because obviously I get asked it quite a bit online, and in person, normally I'll respond back with a question and say, well, how much do you think we need? Or how much do you need? And most people don't know the answer to that question. They just assume that protein is the most important nutrient that we need to be concerned about. And the reality is that most, marketing and TV that we see and labels that we read promote protein very heavily, and mostly in the form of animal protein, because that is a very protein dense food. But people think that we need much more than we actually do. And there's I would say, understanding of that. So the first thing that I get them to do is really reflect back on themselves. It's like, well, how much do I actually need? I've never really thought of that question. Do I need this much? Or have I been told that I need this much, or been sold that I need this much? So that's normally where I start. And then that question kind of allows them to come to a realization instead of me telling them something. And I think it's always more powerful when the person that you're talking to realizes something for themselves rather than you telling them an answer, because it sticks that way. And it's almost like their own self-discovery. And then of course I'll always like help educate whenever I can, or in whatever way I can. But that's kind of how my answer evolved over time.
Mm-hmm. Is your relationship with protein different from other bodybuilders who have get their protein from meat?
Yes, 100%. At least at the time when I was bodybuilding, it definitely was. A normal bodybuilding diet, I've talked about this many times, is very, very protein centric. So that means, a bodybuilder will wake up, they'll have egg whites for breakfast, or full eggs for breakfast. Then next up, they'll have a whey protein shake that probably has dairy in it, as well as whey protein, or maybe a combination of whey and casein protein. Then they'll have chicken breast for lunch, maybe a second lunch, a third lunch. Then they'll also have fish. They'll also have ground beef or bison or lean turkey, whatever other protein source that's part of their nutritional regimen. So there's like 5 or 6 different animals that I just listed, or animal products that I just listed. And in my experience, I have been able to accomplish the same results than some of the top bodybuilders in the league that I competed in, without consuming any of those traditional protein sources, which is very untraditional in the bodybuilding world. So naturally that generated a lot of intrigue from other bodybuilders. And my relationship with protein in particular was kind of what I just alluded to, was like, how much do I actually need? Like, you know, I'm being told in these magazines and reading on these articles about I need, you know, upwards of 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. And for me, that was a lot, you know, that was a lot. And I would feel it. You know, initially when I was a vegetarian, I'd like try to hit those numbers, which at the time I was probably 150 pounds. So that would mean I would get upwards of like almost 300 grams of protein per day. And as a vegetarian, like that would mean that I had to rely heavily on dairy products, because that was what I knew to have the most protein at the time. And that just caused a whole, you know, laundry list of digestive problems and, you know, acne and like just inflammation that I wasn't realizing that the food that I was consuming to try to build muscle was actually hindering me from building muscle efficiently. So I would say that my relationship with protein is definitely different, because I always promote how much do you actually need, and can you optimize that? And once you hit that target, anything beyond that target doesn't necessarily translate into more strength or more muscle. It just translates into a misutilization of your calories, where you could be reallocating those calories to foods that promote health and vitality, like vegetables, you know, fruit, things that most bodybuilders tend to avoid because of the, again, misconception around carbohydrates. So yeah, I would say definitely a little bit different than most.
Getting in all those, you know, so many bodybuilders and even athletes don't think about the power of the food in terms of what it's actually going to be able to do and promote in our bodies, right? From all the antioxidants and phytonutrients and vitamins and minerals, and what they're for and how they help us to repair and recover, and understanding that training is not getting us stronger, that it's complete tear down, and really what we put in. And the variety of what we put in is so important, not just that one single, you know, nutrient that they think is the repair of all repairs, being protein. What has been your experience with other bodybuilders starting to ask more questions about that face that's on their plate? I'm quite sure the conversation starts with them, and, you know, maybe their vanity and their desire to be at the top of their sport. But how often have people started to ask the questions about the face on their plate and what's behind that face?
You know, since I've started my very first bodybuilding show, it always generated the most interest from my fellow competitors. And I think there's a few reasons for that. And, you know, obviously one of them is just the curiosity. It's like, how is this person doing this without consuming any of the foods that I have been told to consume or have learned to consume in order to achieve these same results? So, you know, most bodybuilders that I talk to have a genuine curiosity. And whenever I don't ever lead with, you know, animal welfare or any kind of ethical standpoint, just because that tends to push people away very quickly, because it creates this sort of, even unintentionally, maybe like a moral high ground or position of feeling like they are doing something wrong, even if it's unintentional or they're just unaware. So what I always lead with is the vanity, you know, how it can selfishly serve them in some way. And in the case of a bodybuilder, it can serve you in many ways, and it can benefit you in many ways, even if you're just doing it purely for the sake of being a competitor or being the best at what you do. And most bodybuilders are willing to do whatever it takes in order to step on stage and win a plastic trophy. You know, and that includes, you know, sacrificing their health and sacrificing the way that they feel in order to look a certain way. And what I tell them is that you can still do all of the things that you want to do and accomplish all of the things that you want to accomplish, but you don't have to sacrifice the way you feel. You can actually feel great while you're doing it, and you don't have to give anything up. Like the taste, everything that you get from meat, you can replicate with nowadays even so many options, alternative options, and you can actually feel great while you do it. And that's very enticing for somebody that has been you know for a lack of a better word, like punishing their body for years. So if you can explore that and get them to explore it themselves and be like, wow, I can do this and feel great. This is normally it's always like a learning curve there, but if they can commit to it, then they can experience it for themselves. And after that, it doesn't require much convincing. It's like, okay, I didn't shrivel up into a raisin. I'm actually like feeling great. I feel energized. I'm sleeping better. I have more mental clarity. I'm recovering faster. I'm building muscle quicker. I'm getting leaner. My body composition is improving. All of these things just kind of fall into place. And then it's like, all you needed was an introduction. All you needed was the right conversation, the message coming from the right person.
I remember you telling me backstage that everyone was starving and you're chomping on bananas like right before you go on stage. And I thought, well, who knew a banana could be like the greatest tool for animal rights and oh gosh.
Yeah, I mean, even and just to clarify, backstage, a lot of bodybuilders are eating. They're definitely eating a lot because there's a strategy to really fuel your body with quick digesting carbohydrates. And most of the time, bodybuilders will use candy. They'll use jelly. They'll just like pour honey down their throat, just because your body metabolizes it very quickly, and you can get a very good pump. Like you can get vascular very quickly when you flood your system with like fast digesting carbohydrates. So for me, I would always use the natural sources, which was like banana, fruit, something healthy. But then like these guys that they're literally eating bags of gummy worms, stepping on stage, like flexing, and then getting off stage and feeling like the crash, the dehydration, the sugar rush, everything that they felt, they just immediately feel like garbage.
What is it like out there as a whole in terms of vegan bodybuilders or physique competitors? You're the only member of the International Federation of Bodybuilders, Dotsie mentioned IFBB in your introduction, to have never eaten meat, and one of the only vegans. Is that correct? Tell us what it looks like out there in terms of vegan bodybuilders.
Well, I think that it's growing. I think that the sport is, from a vegan bodybuilding perspective, is expanding. There's been a few people that have come on the scene. I retired back in 2018 and kind of like really haven't looked back since. But up until that point, there was very, very few people that were competing and succeeding. I think those are two different, categories. Anybody can join a contest, but how many people actually win or how many people actually have success is a totally different story. So I think it's important to have representation in the sport, and not just people that are vegan, but people that are actually winning and showing that it's possible, not to just step on stage, but to actually beat your peers that have been, conditioned to believe that there's no other way. So this is like, that was honestly why I chose the sport. I mean, it chose me, but that was why I followed through with it so much, was because I figured that if I were to have success in the sport, in a sport that's centered around building muscle and almost like a representation of health, in some ways, that it would inspire people to open their mind and think that if it's possible for a bodybuilder that requires, all of this nutrition and all of this work and effort, and there is no limitation, then it's possible for me too. Because I mean, really, I was just I still am just like a normal guy that just got really focused on a mission. And I think that anybody could do it, given the right amount of conviction and work ethic, and and just willingness to sacrifice in order to reach your goals.
Yeah. Nimai, your parents were Hare Krishnas, and I'm sure, and I know that you've talked about before. I mean, that really, guided your ethics and of course your choice to lead a vegetarian diet from, since birth. It seems like Hare Krishnas are misunderstood, especially here in the States. A lot of people know them as, hanging out in circles, chanting and with shaved heads and orange robes and don't really understand what they're about. I'd love for you to tell us what it was like being part of the Hare Krishna family growing up, and if it is still a practice of yours.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting upbringing. Definitely, I realized how unique it was after I left the community, because it was a really awesome farm community, and everyone that lived within the perimeter of the community was were Hare Krishnas, and it was a very deeply spiritual community based around service. So everyone in the community kind of had their own roles within the community. They would cook, they would dress the deities, they would show up to the services, and we would have a Sunday feast every Sunday where it was open to anybody, and they could come and hear the philosophy from in the temple, and then have vegetarian food, which is called prasad, which is offered to the deities first, which is just basically blessing the food. So it was a really awesome community. And then whenever I moved out, I was integrating into a more traditional Southern community where most of the surrounding areas were Catholic or Southern Baptist, and they did not I would say understand my community or the spiritual practice that we followed. So I learned very quickly that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. That if I stood out or if I talked about it, people would continue to interrogate me. And at that age, I was 8, and I didn't necessarily have the capacity or the intelligence to articulate some of the complex philosophies of something like that. So I just stopped talking about it. I didn't embrace it. I didn't own it. I kind of rejected it in a way, at least publicly. Within my home, I still practiced, and obviously being raised in that family, but outside I didn't really talk about it anymore. And it kind of made me not ashamed, but just afraid to be who I was and own where I come from. But at the same time, even if I kind of strayed away from it, during my adolescence, I ended up coming full circle again at the age of 20, 24, 25. And that ultimately is what led me to the path that I'm on now, is reconnecting with my spiritual practice. And although I don't label it as anything, I just call it my spiritual practice, it's really allowed me to kind of get in touch with who I am, what my core values are, and how I live my life. And I think that just by owning that and embracing that, I think that I give, and because I do it so publicly, I think that I give people permission to do the same thing. And I receive messages all the time. And I think that's one of the most rewarding things that I can do with my platform, is just give people permission to be who they truly are and not be afraid of judgment.
Hey, do you know a kid who's always got a runny nose, stomach aches, or stubborn skin issues that just won't go away? Sometimes the answer is hiding in plain sight, like the milk in their glass or the cheese on their plate. At Switch for Good, we created the Kids program to help families uncover the connection between dairy and common childhood symptoms. It's completely free and packed with expert-backed tools, simple recipes, and printable resources that you can bring straight to your pediatrician. Every child has the right to good health and a brighter future. So whether it's your son or daughter, your grandchild, your niece or nephew, or even the little one that lives next door, this information changes lives. Explore the resources at kidsandmilk.org. Right on the homepage, it says, get your free resources. And I challenge you to take the first step and gather the toolkit we offer, or the education cards, or the waiting room brochures, and march them into a pediatrician office near you. All right, back to the episode.
Hare Krishna is a sect of Hinduism. Tell us about what values you bring with you now as an adult male into your life that are most important to you. Because all of us, if we follow religion, we don't necessarily hold dear all the beliefs of that religion, but there are some that we lead with.
Yeah, and I mean, in Hinduism, there's several, I guess, core concepts that are kind of like a foundation around it, and one of them is that we are eternal souls. And I know this is, across the board for multiple religions, but they believe that our bodies, these vessels that we occupy, are merely temporary, but we as a soul are eternal. And the ultimate goal is to liberate ourselves from this cycle of death and rebirth and reconnect with the source, which could be called heaven, if you want to call it, if you want to give it a label. And ultimately, it's to continue to live a life that is dedicated to bettering yourself and really connecting with your divine essence while we're in this material world. And it really just kind of gives you the guidance to live a life of integrity, to not contribute to pain, suffering, all of these elements that are present in this world, and to just continuously do our best and remember who we are and what we are. And this is, ultimately one of the reasons why I got this. I got, a tattoo on my arm. We're not on video right now. I'll show you, but there's a tattoo on my arm that's written in Sanskrit, and it says ahimsa, which essentially translates into nonviolence. And that is one of the core values that I have, is to really try to live a life of nonviolence and not contribute to any other living being suffering, because we're all suffering in our own way, and we're all fighting a battle that everybody knows nothing about. And that translates to even the actions, the words that we use, even the thoughts that we have about ourselves and other people. If we can have more loving, compassionate thoughts and act accordingly, then the world around us would be a much different place. But unfortunately, it's not perfect right now. But even the food that we eat, that is a form of either of compassion or violence. And if you just simply refrain from consuming animals who by their very nature are deceased or dead on your plate, then you remove yourself from that contribution. And with each action that you do, you're basically choosing to live a life of compassion. So that is one way of looking at, just something as simple as eating. It can be an act of compassion or an act of violence. And which one do you want to choose?
Nimai, let's talk about some science, because I know your engineering brain likes to lean into that. Mine does too, from my background. And you just mentioned Veg Nutrition, which is a real supplement company. And as you know, there's a fair amount of plant-based doctors, and many that we've had on the show that are not so big into supplements and powders. For a variety of different reasons, not all the same. But obviously you think that they're a good idea. I'd love to hear why that is, why it is something that a general fitness person would either need, or that you would suggest that they add into their regimen. And kind of what you feel, what is the gap you feel like it fills that maybe food can't?
That's a great question. And it's a bit, how do I put this? I also have always been very vocal about not needing supplements, like always focusing on food and nutrition first. And supplements are called supplements for a reason. They're supplementary. They're not the thing. They're not the main thing that you should be focusing on. It's always nutrition. And I think that most doctors, if not all, would agree that there are certain nutrients within a plant-based diet and even a traditional diet that most people are not consuming enough of, meaning they're not consuming a variety of different plants and vegetables that provide them the nutrients that we need to thrive. And there's a few of them that can be easily identified, especially when it comes to a plant-based diet, that we should be looking at carefully and managing and making sure that we are getting those nutrients, because that's foundational. That's not, regardless of performance and athletics, like that's foundational. If you don't have proper foundational health, and good luck trying to be a top performing athlete. So this is how I approached the creation of veg nutrition. Was like, first, probably the most expected product for us to launch would be protein powder, right? Because probably sells the most, it's the most attractive. It has, the psychological effects of consuming protein and building muscle, almost a placebo effect, right? And then, like, we started off our company with a multivitamin that was contained B12, vitamin D3, and plant-derived omega-3s, essential fatty acids, and K2 to increase the absorption. So those were essential. Like, that's why we called it the essential. Like, everybody should be taking a look at, their blood panels and see if they're getting enough of those, because that can lead to fatigue. It can lead to cognitive dysfunction. It can lead to low energy levels. It can lead to a whole laundry list of different, issues that are very subtle in nature. So if we can just guarantee those, then that's phenomenal. And then after you, take care of your foundational health, then you can look at, what extra do you want to do? What performance needs do you have? And although you can provide everything that you need from a plant-based diet, even if you go like a whole food plant-based diet, you can get more than enough protein than what you need. The difference is the convenience of it. And if I've learned anything from being a coach the past 5 years, is that convenience is everything, especially when it comes to adherence, when it comes to saving time, when it comes to the busy parent. And protein powders are a great way to get that extra bit of protein that you need as an athlete to provide enough resources to build muscle in a very conveniently packaged source. So instead of carrying around 2 extra meal prep containers that are full of lentils, and you have to eat 2 extra cups of lentils or 3 extra cups of lentils or beans, or that volume of food per day, which can be tough for anybody, but also like leaving you feeling heavy and things like that. So like, protein powder is an awesome alternative for that, because you can take it with you. It's light, it feels light, it's easy to digest in your body, and it provides you with enough nutrients for building muscle. I think that most physicians normally talk about like a whole food plant-based diet from the very far end of the spectrum, like no oil, no sugar, no salt, whole food plant-based, no processed foods. That is great for people that are at that point in their lives. Most people are not. Most people are a little bit further down the spectrum as far as like what's realistic, right? And most of the time that's not realistic to be that attuned to your diet and that concerned with it. So I think that most doctors can, talk about what they read on paper, but it doesn't always translate to reality. And I know this too from being an engineer. Sometimes the design of something looks fantastic on paper. You get out into the field and the technicians are building it, and they're like, dude, this doesn't work. Like, we have to find another way to make this practical and make it work. And you just have to work with it. And that's the same thing with supplements. It's not necessary, but it can be very convenient.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a couple of things that I think that folks that aren't in the elite realms, and obviously that's a very small percentage of the population, but also certainly the folks that you're marketing to. I wish you guys were around for my training days all those years. Is I found, like you said, the sheer volume of food that I had to put in was just literally nauseating to me. I would get to the point where I felt nauseated from eating so much. My teammates and I used to sit down and call it force feeding because we literally had to take in, we were on our 5,000th, 6,000th calorie of the day. And it felt, it just wasn't fun anymore. I mean, it wasn't, the joy of eating was completely zapped. And then secondly, as an endurance athlete, because we went so deep into the pain cave and created so much lactic acid. When you have that much of a lactic acid surge, it also is in your gut. And so I would experience literal nauseating feeling from my gut being filled with lactic acid. And at that point, it's very hard to just take in any kind of volume of food, and I'd have to turn to drinks, to shakes, and those are extreme examples, but they're real. And anytime I've ever described those two reasons to doctors, it's like they've never heard either one of those before. Right. So
yeah,
it's
the there's something real. There's something to be said too, that most of the time the doctors are quoting studies based off of, the average of people. Most high performing athletes are on the fringes, so their requirements are a little bit different. Their strategy is a little bit different. Like as an endurance athlete, you're not going to carry around a backpack full of lentils. Like if you're on a race, you're not going to just pull out a thing of lentils or something like that, meal, and start eating it. Like you're going to go to your shake, you're going to go to your gel, you're going to give you something that's like the most convenient for you to achieve your goal. And it may not always be the whole food source, that's comes in nature's package, but at the same time, it is very effective and realistic for whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. So I think, most of the things that can be applied to the general population, but when you're talking about athletes, there's some shifts that need to happen. And there's like an intersection of ideal versus realistic.
Yeah.
As a coach, you, and probably our audience is closer to your clients whom you coach rather than both of you who are amazing athletes. What are some tips that you give your clients? Because I think our audience would relate to this in terms of if they want, do you have 3 main tips if they want to change their eating, maybe lose body fat, because that's what most Americans go to coaches for or listen to shows like ours?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is great. I think I've got probably a million tips, but the one that jumps out at me first is setting a goal. That is the number one thing. People talk about the things that they want to do, but it's rare that they actually set the goal. And when you set a goal for yourself, it should be defined, like clearly defined as much as possible. And what I mean by that is like give yourself a date, put a sense of urgency to it. Don't put it off until next year. Don't just put it open-ended. Like give yourself a date to work towards. The other thing that you should really define is your why. Why are you doing the things that you want to do? What is the real reason behind the goal that you're setting for yourself? And it could be deeper than what you think it is. Most people, they're like, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds. Okay, that's a great goal, but why? Well, I want to feel good in my body. Okay, why do you want to feel good in your body? Because I've spent, years feeling not confident, feeling like some bit of maybe even shame around my body. Maybe I just want to be able to walk up the stairs and not be out of breath. I want to be able to run with my kids and not feel like I can't keep up. Like there's real reasons beyond the surface that are driving you. So if you can tap into those drivers and remember why it is that you want to do the things that you do, it's a lot easier to stick to those goals instead of just being like, oh, I just want to lose 10 pounds because it's a number on a scale and society tells me I should be at this number. Like that's not a real reason. That is not personalized. It's not tied to an emotion. And I think that if you can find the emotion, or even and think of who it is that you want to become. This is like the best tip I can give somebody is like really imagine and define who it is that you want to become. Who is the person that you want to embody? Do you want to be a representation of health? Do you want to embody somebody that is like exudes vitality, somebody that is, just radiating and feels good and confident and really secure with who they are and what they want to do? Like all of those things you should ask yourself, like, how do I want to expand and grow? And then just like write a list down. And then anytime you feel like you're not going to do the thing that you committed to, like go back to that and say, wait a minute, this is the old me talking, the old comfortable me that wants to stay put in this familiar comfort zone and is limiting myself, wants to stay put. But the new me, the person that I told myself that I'm becoming, they're going to show up. They're going to put in the work. And eventually it won't feel like such a challenge anymore. It'll just become a way of being. And I think that, when you embody something fully, then it just becomes effortless after a certain point. And I get asked this question all the time: how do you stay lean? How do you maintain your muscle? It's like, it's just a way of being at this point. Like, I've trained myself to eat healthy, to train every day, to really prioritize my health, my mental, physical, and spiritual health. And the rest is just, everything falls into place after that. It becomes non-negotiable at that point, and it's just a way of who I am. So I think those are some really great tips for anybody that's listening and wants to start their journey, is really define what it is that you want and who you want to be, and then just work backwards from there.
Hearing you talk about that made me think of you and your why, and you live so externally and so publicly. Is your why internal or external? And what is it?
Could you say that? Can you say that one more time? You cut out.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Is your why, Nimai's why, more of an external why or an internal why? And what is your true why?
I think that throughout my career, my why has shifted. Originally when I studied and went to school and decided to be an engineer, I think that they were all rooted in the wrong reasons. Like, maybe they were more egotistical reasons, to feed my ego or my insecurity, or maybe the things that I thought I wanted, which was like financial stability, the prestige of being an engineer, and like the title, and like the everything that encapsulates that profession. And what I realized was that those things that I pedestalized did not bring me fulfillment, and they didn't bring me joy, and they weren't true to me. Like, I was suffering on the inside. And I think that was because my life was misaligned with who it was that I truly am. And I think that through fitness, and really just doing the thing that made me happy, like really just finding that thing that I was excited about and passionate about, and leaning into it, and really committing to that really unfolded this life that I'm living now. And through that, I found that not only can I do the thing that really makes me happy and feel good, and allows me to show up as my truest, most authentic, expressed self, but I could also be of service to other people. And realizing that this gift that I have, which is and really is just like, I don't know how to phrase it, but like perspective from a very, I would say, my biggest challenge growing up was acceptance, right? Or feeling the need to be accepted within a community, and then recognizing that the only acceptance that I need is for myself. And once I leaned into that, then really everything else unfolded the way it did. And through that, I feel like I found my purpose, because I can not only inspire people to be healthy, but really just embrace who they are and give them permission to follow their passion and follow their purpose. And really it starts with cleaning up your physical vessel. And if you feel good, if you're in tune with your body, and you don't have any kind of like ailment or illness or dis-ease that's going on inside, it really allows you to tune in to who you are and what makes you happy. And if you can just kind of like get that out of the way, then it frees up all this space to explore that and reflect and experience, and just really be honest with yourself. Because I think that's like the at least that for me, that's where I went wrong, was I didn't know myself. I thought I did, but I knew myself for all the wrong reasons. And fitness and following my passion and excitement really just allowed me to get to know myself better, and then show up in this world in a way that I could serve others.
I think a lot of people want to know, yes, I agree with you completely, that if we get the physical, if we feel good in our body, that takes a lot of burden off our day. And it's not a superficial thing, because it affects our mood and our outlook and the way we feel around other people. I'm sure our audience would like to know sort of what is some breakfast, lunch, and dinner that you eat or that you recommend to your clients so that they can start feeling that physical freedom that you do?
Mm. That's a great question. For me personally, I always have like a light breakfast. I always wake up very early. I have my whole morning routine. I like to just drink some water. And then I actually like to train fasted as well, because I feel very energized and creative in the morning. Is when I have my most creative energy, and I can channel it when I train, because it allows me to get into this meditative space of what I'm going to do for the day and how I'm going to work. I'm going to show up at meetings and just really get creative. And then afterwards I'll come home, and it'll probably be like around like 11 or 12 when I have my first meal. And it's normally just a protein shake. So some type of smoothie with protein powder in it. And my smoothies are pretty big. And I genuinely love smoothies. Like, it's super easy. I'm a keep it simple, stupid kind of guy. Like, just the easier it is for me to make, and the less time it takes, the more likely I am to do it. So smoothies for me, throw it all in a blender. I'll do some plant milk, some protein powder, lots of blueberries, lots of berries in general, some greens. I'll also put in some things like ashwagandha, maca powder. I'll also do amla powder, which is like Indian gooseberry, which has a lot of like anti-inflammatory properties. So it helps me with recovery after a training session. So that'll be like my first meal. And then throughout the day, I normally really rely on like stir fries, like something that I can cook in a pan with some vegetables, some tofu or tempeh. I'll put some kind of non-oil based sauce on there. I'll put a ton of herbs and spices. Normally I tend to go more towards the more like the Indian kind of spices. So like the curries, the cumin, the turmeric, all of those types of spices, because that's like kind of how I was raised. So I'll do like a stir fry, or like a Buddha bowl that has like grains, sweet potatoes, greens, lots of color. I think that's really important for people, is to just diversify the amount of color that you have on your plate, and you're naturally going to get lots of antioxidants and lots of key nutrients that's going to help you recover. And then for dinner, I eat really like what most, I don't know, like burritos. I'll, have the occasional pizza, the vegan pizza. I'll do vegan sushi, pasta. I mean, you name it, I eat it. But the key here is to really keep the core of your recipes and the core of the meals that you're eating healthy, and try not to have that many, processed foods. Try not to, if you're going to cook with oil, like, use it as a tool and not as an ingredient. There's ways around cooking with oil that are very tasty. You can use like a vegetable broth, or I use liquid aminos from Bragg's. That's a really great alternative. And just make sure you have like more vegetables than anything else. Like, if you just kind of follow those basic guidelines, then naturally you're going to eat really healthy, and you're going to have a diverse, nutritious, meal plan.
Nimai, I got to tell you, you came over to my house and we did a cooking video after we did a workout video, which people can certainly find on the Switch for Good YouTube channel. It's a great story, your story, and we finished it with some kitchen fun. And you made the stir fry with the more Indian spices, the curry and the cumin and the turmeric. And we had a lot of leftovers, and I took it up to my husband in his office to have for lunch. And to this day, what do you want for dinner, babe? Oh, Nimai's tofu. Like, okay. It's so cool. We think about you all the time, but we have that. And I think I have it mastered. It's really just so easy. And you guys can find it on that video, but it's just a lot of everything. It's garlic salt, right? And garlic powder, I think, actually, and and turmeric and cumin and curry, and you just dump a lot of it in there, and it's so flavorful. So this has been just a gorgeous talk with you in every way. I loved, and I know Alexandra did, just traversing, your whys and talking fulfillment and spirituality and and nutrients, and of course a little bodybuilding and love lost. So thank you. I know this is going to be really inspiring to our listeners. So thank you so much for joining us.
Tell us where people can find you and see a lot on your Instagram, those big meals that you make, those delicious, healthy meals.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you both for having me on the show. I really enjoyed this conversation. And this is actually the first podcast interview that I've done in quite some time. So it's nice to just get back on the mics and just talk openly in long form conversation. So thank you for making it an awesome space for that. And in order to find me, you really just have to search my name anywhere and I'll pop up on all socials. It's just Nimai Delgado. And I post a lot on Instagram, mainly. I post workout videos, I post nutritional tips, I post recipes, I post inspiring content or, polarizing content to some, but either way, it's my truth. And I also have another page called Vegan Fitness Com, Vegan Fitness COM. And that is my business page where we post tons and tons of nutritional tips, workout information, vegan hacks, vegan lifestyle tips. And it's been a really great resource for people to direct people to that are new to this lifestyle or that want to learn more and want to learn how to optimize your health and fitness with a vegan diet. And I also have the Generation V podcast. I've almost forgot. So I also have a podcast that I'm relaunching this month. This time before it was only on audio, and now I'm recording on video every episode. I created a really cool studio in my apartment, and that is going to be launching on YouTube this month under my main channel, which is, again, just Nimai Delgado.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Nimai.